Hello, and welcome to the latest episode of KRAD COVID Readings. I'm Keith R.A. DeCandido, doing my bit to cure the coronavirus blues by reading my writing. This is part 2 of my reading of the HEROES REBORN novella, Save the Cheerleader, Destroy the World. It bridges the gap between the end of the TV series Heroes, which started in 2006, and the 2015 miniseries Heroes Reborn. This is the second part, telling the story of what Claire Petrilli was doing between when she jumped off the Ferris wheel at the end of the last episode of Heroes and the fateful day, June 13th, 2014, which is where the story of Heroes Reborn started. Chapter 6, 12 September 2011. Excerpt from NBC 5 News at 10, Chicago, Illinois. Breaking news now on the house fire at 43rd Street in Canaryville. NBC5 has obtained exclusive footage from the security camera in Frankie's Pizza Shop, located across the street from the house in question. The image is a bit pixelated, but you can see that there is a human figure who suddenly, wait for it, there it is, he catches fire. The fire then spreads to the rest of the house, as you can see. There's also this segment where the same figure is seen running away from the building, still on fire. This is more and more looking like a case of arson caused by an Evo. Chicago Police Department spokeswoman Bethany Mazursky had this to say. The arson investigation is ongoing, so we cannot comment specifically. However, the possibility of Evo involvement means we are in contact with the Department of Homeland Security. But right now, that's only a possibility. We are investigating all possibilities, just as we do for every case. Here now in our studio is Gregory Quay, Alderman of Ward 4. Alderman, thank you for joining us.
Yes, thank you for having me.
Alderman, you recently spoke out along with the governor, both Illinois senators, half a dozen other aldermen, and 4 of Chicago's congressmen about the inadequacies of the Evo Registration Act.
Yes, I did. And this incident in my ward speaks to why we're so concerned. And yes, that's just the latest incident. In Miami last week, there was an attempted drive-by, but the intended target instead killed the gunman by electrocuting him with his fingers. There's a couple thieves in New York who can walk through walls and are robbing people blind. There's a man in Seattle who's walking up to people, telling them to give them their money, and they do without remembering it a minute later. And right here in Chicago, last month, a woman in Diversey touched a car and made it disintegrate just so she could get a parking spot. For that matter, we still don't know what really happened in New York last year with that carnival that appeared out of nowhere. Yes, the Petrilli girl's done a nice job of distracting us from the questions that still haven't been answered, like the earthquake. But in light of these events, the federal government needs to take a harder tack with Evos before more harm is done. It's a small miracle that nobody died in that fire, but the Evo responsible for it is still out there and still dangerous. And yes, we need more than simple voluntary registration. Laws regarding firearms have always had to change to accommodate new guns appearing on the market, and this is no different. Evos are, for all intents and purposes, weapons, and we need to regulate the use of those weapons before more people get hurt. Thank you, Alderman. When we come back, sports with Steve, looking at what the Bears did yesterday, what the Cubs did tonight, and what the Sox hope to do tomorrow. Chapter 7, 20 September 2011, Crown Plaza Hotel, McLean, Virginia. It was with a smile on his face that Jacob Kurtzberg wheeled himself out of the elevator toward his hotel room. After months and months of being stonewalled, he had finally been able to make his case before a judge, across from an assistant U.S. attorney who had tried and failed to argue that Samuel Sullivan was a national security risk. Judge Ventura was having none of that. Even if Samuel was a terrorist, he had a right to counsel, not to mention a right to be charged, which he hadn't been. Jacob had also made it clear to the AUSA that he would continue to be very public on the subject. He'd been appearing on every television show that would have him, from national cable news to local network news and back again, trying to get justice for his client, and that the Supreme Court would be his next step. The truth of the matter was that Jacob knew that Samuel was guilty as sin. Samuel was indeed an Evo, and Jacob was morally certain that Samuel had killed his brother Joseph, and also Lydia, not to mention destroying an entire town and trying to do the same to New York City. But what Jacob was morally certain about didn't matter. You convict people based on moral certainty, you get the Salem witch trials. In a civilized society, what mattered was that you could prove what you could prove in a court of law. And the only thing that they could actually prove was that he had set up the carnival without a permit. For that, Samuel had been held in a hole somewhere in D.C. for 9 months. Not for much longer, though. Judge Ventura had ordered the AUSA to produce Samuel for a meeting with counsel to which he was entitled under the law. An hour after leaving the courthouse, Jacob got a text saying that Samuel would be in an interrogation room in the District 3 headquarters of Metro PD first thing in the morning. It meant he'd have to schlep over to V Street, but he'd just call a car service like usual. The Carnival was paying for it in any case. He arrived at the door to his room, pulled out his keycard, and pushed it into the slot. After the light turned green and the lock clicked, Jacob pushed the handle downward and the extra wide door opened automatically. Before he could wheel himself in, however, he felt a breeze and saw a blur shoot past him. What the? He wheeled himself in to see Edgar, standing in the middle of the hotel room, his trademark knives gripped in his hands. Edgar? What are you doing here? Heard you were getting Samuel out of prison. Of course I am. That's my job. Jacob hadn't even seen Edgar since the mess in New York. Last he'd heard, Samuel had accused Edgar of killing Joseph. Well, you're doing it too well to suit me. Another blur, and Jacob looked down in shock to see blood pouring from his throat, staining his suit, gushing onto the metal arms of his wheelchair. The pain didn't actually come for a second or two, but then it was everywhere, all over his body. He fell forward, barely feeling it as he collapsed onto the carpeted floor, blood now pooling under him. He managed to croak out. The last words Jacob heard were, Samuel staying in his hole for as long as possible. Forever it'd be best. Chapter 8. 1 October 2011, the White House, Washington, D.C. Noah fidgeted as he sat outside the Oval Office. Next to him, Angela Petrelli was smiling. Is something wrong, Noah? He glanced over at the closed door on the curved wall. Just not to this level, used to this level of, well, publicity. I'm more comfortable in the shadows. We always did things in secret, under the radar. That was the point. We did it well. This... He shook his head. Those days, I'm afraid, are long gone, thanks to Claire. The toothpaste is out of the tube. The woman on the other side of Angela, whom Noah did not know, said, It was always going to end up this way. It's a wonder you kept it under wraps as long as you did. But there are just too many Evos now. The company was never going to be able to handle so many. Noah leaned forward to try to get a better look at the woman. I'm sorry, you are... Before she could answer, the door to the Oval Office opened, and a young man said, The president's ready for you three now. With a heavy sigh, Noah stood up. Angela and the other woman did the same. As they walked toward the door, Noah whispered, Do you have any idea what this is about? Yes. That was all Angela would say. Working for DHS had its issues, but one thing Noah did not miss from the company days was Angela's tiresomely enigmatic nature. Noah had only seen the Oval Office on television. Oddly, it seemed smaller in real life, with the furniture kind of crammed together. The president was sitting in an easy chair, with the vice president and the chief of staff seated to his left. The young man who'd brought them in indicated the couch on the president's right for the three of them. Noah sat furthest from the president, while Angela sat in the middle, leaving the other woman to sit nearest the commander-in-chief. That suited Noah fine. Without any preamble, the president started talking. Even as we speak, Congress is voting on an amendment to the Evo Act that will make registration mandatory. Noah tensed. This was a game-changer, to say the least. Though given the reports they've been getting, he couldn't bring himself to be surprised. The vice president said, This changes how the registration centers will be operating. And since not registering will be a felony, it will also require a level of enforcement that was not previously necessary. The president looked right at Angela. Now, DHS could start from scratch on this. Mr. Bennet here has done excellent work to bring Homeland up to speed, but this will require an entirely new mandate. I think it'll be much easier on everyone if we outsource this to a company that already has extensive background and experience in these matters. The chief of staff then spoke up. We did our due diligence on Primatech paper, Miss Petrelli. It was fascinating reading. Turns out that all 12 of you who founded the company had equal ownership shares. And when someone dies, all that person's shares go not to, say, their heirs, but instead to the surviving shareholders. Noah turned to stare at Angela. He knew for a fact that the other 11 founders of the company were deceased. Which means in real terms, the vice president said, that you're the sole owner of the company. Lock, stock, and level 5. That caused Noah to wince. If the vice president knew about level 5, then their security was severely compromised. Either that, or Nathan had revealed a lot more to the president than Noah had realized. Angela gave that irritating half-smile of hers. Hands rested calmly on her lap. Your intelligence with regard to the ownership structure of the company is quite accurate, Mr. Vice President. Thanks, the vice president said dryly. The president leaned forward. Ms. Petrelli, the U.S. government would like to contract Primatech Paper to enforce the amended Evo Act. The company is inactive, Mr. President. Angela said. The files and resources and personnel are all scattered to the 9 winds. It would take tremendous time, effort, and capital to bring the company back up to fighting strength, as it were. I'm not sure this is the best idea. Noah frowned. Angela wasn't actually refusing. What is she playing at? That was a question he had often asked himself when dealing with Angela or her late husband. The chief of staff leaned back on the couch. Miss Petrelli, a minute ago you remarked on how good our intelligence is with regard to your company. You were correct. In fact, it's so good that we're quite familiar with the overwhelming number of felonies committed by Primatech's personnel. Breaking and entering, kidnapping, attempted murder, assault, fraud. Fraud's a misdemeanor, the woman sitting next to Angela said. That got a smile out of the chief of staff, but it wasn't a particularly pleasant one. The point, Ms. Petrelli, is that you can accept the president's offer, or I can walk over to my office and make a call to the attorney general. I guarantee you'll spend the rest of your life in prison, and it will not be a minimum security prison either. Angela turned to look at the president. So it's blackmail. Noah managed not to snort. The president was up for re-election next year. If he didn't get a handle on the Evo situation soon, he wouldn't stand a chance in hell of winning a second term. It's you being offered a choice, the president said. Make it now, please. Actually, I made it already 9 days ago. Since you seem to know all about the company, I assume you know what my particular Evo ability is. Angela used air quotes and a tone of purest derision when she uttered the term Evo. You see, on the 21st of September, I woke up from a dream. In that dream, I saw this very meeting happening. And then I turned on the television to see a news story about the death of Jacob Kurtzberg, at which point I knew why this meeting would be happening. Given that Mr. Kurtzberg's murder has dominated the news for the past week and a half, it was inevitable that your little law was going to need changing. However, my interest in running the day-to-day of the company is very close to nil. In the past, I had colleagues who were happy to be administrators, but they are all, as you know, quite dead. However, since I knew this meeting was coming, I took steps. The chief of staff said, You listed Ms. Kravitz here as your business partner when you checked in with security, but she's not on Primatech's org chart. I assume she's the one of the steps you took? Yes. As I'm sure you all know, Erica Kravitz is the head of Renatus. Just yesterday, I finalized the deal whereby Renatus bought the company. She is now in charge. And, Kravitz said quickly, I'm more than happy to take on the contract. Renatus is very interested in the many possibilities inherent in these Evo powers. These people can change the world in so many ways, and they've been hiding. Even after that blonde girl made it possible for them to come out of the phone booth, so to speak. With this new law, we'll have unfettered access to them. We can cure diseases. We can make all manner of scientific breakthroughs. We can protect the environment. We can do so much, Mr. President. I relish this opportunity. Good. The president leaned back in his chair. Mr. Bennet, you're probably wondering why you were invited to this meeting. In fact, Noah had been hoping that his presence would go unnoticed. In response, he simply said, Yes, sir. I want you to be a part of this. You worked for Primatech in the past, and you've been invaluable to Homeland. The Secretary's reports have been, frankly, gushing. Since you've done a great deal of work setting up the registration centers, and since you have experience with field work of the type that will be required, I want you to play a role. He turned his gaze on Kravitz. I assume, Ms. Kravitz, that having Mr. Bennet on board will be acceptable? Noah noted that the president had not phrased that as a question, which was one of the reasons why he didn't object. Kravitz smiled. Of course, Mr. President. I'd be a fool not to make use of Mr. Bennet's experience. Good. The president stood up. The vote should be completed tonight, and I'll sign the bill in the morning. Thank you all. Thank you, Mr. President, Kravitz said as she rose to her feet. Once they left the Oval Office and were standing in one of the White House hallways, Kravitz offered her hand to Noah. Mr. Bennet, I'm Erica Kravitz. It's truly a pleasure to meet you. I've read quite a bit about you, and I'm looking forward to having you on my team. I'm looking forward to it as well. Consulting is nice, but I prefer to get my hands dirty. Field work is where I'm at my best. Kravitz smiled. That would explain why you didn't object to the president all but ordering you to work for me. Oh, Angela said, Noah's good at following instructions. The young man who'd brought them into the Oval Office reappeared. If you'll come this way, please. Noah nodded, recognizing that they were being escorted out. Are you free this afternoon, Mr. Bennet? Kravitz asked as they walked through the West Wing toward the exit. We have a lot to discuss, and I'd like to get started as soon as possible. Absolutely, Noah said. Besides, this law is the right way to go. Evos have been hiding for too long. It's become second nature to them. They need to be brought out into the open. Angela shot Noah a look. I'm surprised to hear you say that, Noah. You were always so gung-ho about keeping things secret. He shrugged. Like you said before, the toothpaste is out of the tube. There's nothing we can do about it now, so we have to make the best of the situation. Then he smiled ruefully. Besides, I was only gung-ho because that's what I was told to be. Like you also said, I'm good at following instructions.
Mostly.
That damned half-smile again. Either way, Kravitz said, it's a brave new world out there, and Renatus is going to be at the forefront of it. I can promise you that. October 2011. Transcript from Inside the Beltway with Christine Harbaugh.
Good evening. I'm Christine Harbaugh, coming to you live from Washington. Everyone's talking about Evos these days, especially with the new amendment to the Evo Act that means that all of these people with strange powers beyond those of mortal men will have to register with the government. In the week since the amendment was passed in Congress, we've seen the capture of an Evo in Wilmington, Delaware, who nearly set fire to an entire city block. The question is, what does the most famous Evo have to say about all this? And we've got her here tonight. Claire Petrelli, welcome.
Thank you, Christine.
So what do you think of this new wrinkle on the Evo Act?
I gotta say, I'm not thrilled about it. The whole reason why I went public was so that we could all be who we are to everyone, so that people wouldn't have to hide who they are. But it goes both ways. I went public because I wanted to. I know plenty of Evos, some of whom are good friends of mine, who have not gone public. Now they have to, and that's totally not fair. While I think the people who've been assaulted or had crimes committed against them by Evos would beg to differ. Look, I'm not saying that criminals shouldn't be prosecuted. What I am saying is that all Evos shouldn't be punished because of the actions of a few. That's the sort of attitude that led to putting Japanese Americans in internment camps during World War II. Is that really what we want to do again? That's not a bad point, Claire, but nobody's talking about internment camps. They're talking about registration. Same way you're supposed to register a handgun or a sniper rifle. I've heard that argument before, and it's totally bogus. Look, my power isn't a weapon. I can't hurt anybody. All I can do is not get permanently hurt by someone else. How's that a weapon? I met someone last week who's technically an Evo. You know what she can do? Turn things different colors. It's not even permanent. She can only change the color while she's concentrating. Why should she have to register that with the government if she doesn't want to? Yeah, but where do you draw the line? Okay, it should just be Evos who have actual dangerous powers, like the ones who can blow things up or set themselves on fire or move things with their mind, but who decides what's dangerous? Where you draw the line is in forcing people to do it, or, I guess, not forcing them. The act was fine the way it was originally written because it gave people the choice. Speaking of choices, you're headed to Walter Reed tomorrow? Yeah, I've got another appointment with a geneticist, Dr. Deng Shu. We've been trying to figure out ways to make my healing ability transferable. They've actually been able to use a transfusion of my blood to heal people, but it only works with people who have the same blood type as me, and even then it doesn't always do everything we hope for. But we're still trying, and Dr. Shu is optimistic that we can figure it out. So you don't mind being experimented on? It's my choice. I want to help people. Like I said, I can't use my power to do much. It's mostly defensive. But the one thing my power can fight is disease and injury. And since it's not a secret anymore, I can do what I can to try to save the world. Well, I hope that works out for you. Claire Petrelli, the face of the Evos, thanks for coming in. Thanks for having me. Up next, the president's re-election strategy, as well as the slew of candidates lining up to oppose him. You're watching Inside the Beltway. Chapter 10, 18 October 2011, the Petrelli House, Vienna, Virginia. Claire felt personally betrayed that after everything the president had said in private to her in the Oval Office and in public to the whole world at the State of the Union, he had gone and changed the law. To be fair, there had been intense pressure to make the change even before the Carnival's lawyer was killed, and it went into overdrive after that. However, the day after the lawyer was killed, 2 Secret Service agents showed up at the house she was living in, saying that they were her new protection detail by order of the president. At the time, her response had been, okay, but if anyone shoots at us, I'm going to come out of it better than you guys. The agents hadn't laughed. And so she accepted that 2 agents of the U.S. Treasury Department were going to be her constant companions. When she had let her father know via email, his response had been, that's the best news I've heard all year. If nothing else, the number of paparazzi stalking her had gone down a lot since the protection detail started. She had just finished doing an interview with a local station that would air on their 5 o'clock news, and had returned to the house in the suburbs. The large house on Fox Rest Lane was owned by the Petrelli family. Nathan had used it as his D.C. area residence when Congress was in session, but it had been unoccupied since his death. Right now, agents Anna Hopwood and Bekenya Uduana were on duty. The former stayed outside on the front porch while the latter came inside with Claire. Uduana checked through the entire house and declared it to be clear. I'm going to go take a nap, Claire said. You and Anna can help yourselves to the kitchen. Thanks, ma'am, Uduana said as she took a seat in the large living room. Claire knew that neither of them would take her up on the offer. They never ate or drank anything while on duty, except during specific break times, and then only one of them did so at a time. And it was always food and drink they had brought themselves. That had been true of every pair of agents she'd encountered. It was especially hilarious that, given that Angela paid someone to keep the kitchen well stocked at all times, and the provisions in the house were a lot nicer than the junk the agents brought for themselves. She poured herself a glass of water and brought it up to the upstairs to the bedroom. As soon as she closed the door behind her, a voice said, "Claire, please, don't scream." Whirling around, she saw Peter Petrelli and Siler. "What the hell are you?" Siler put a finger to his lips. "Shh. We don't want to get the agents all upset, now do we?" "How did..." She shook her head. "How did you get in here? Agent Uduana cleared the house." Siler turned to look at Peter. How soon they forget. He looked back at Claire. "Come on, Claire. You know what we can do. Do you really think getting past a couple of Secret Service agents is much of a challenge?" Claire glared at Siler, unable to keep the disgust off her face. Not that she was particularly motivated to. "Let's find out." Peter held up a hand. "Claire, wait. We just want to talk to you." "Oh, we do we? I haven't heard from you for months. You ignore every text, every voice message, every email, and when I do finally get to talk to you, you're with him?" "Look, I know you and Siler have a history, but..." "History? That's what you call it?" Claire was livid, but she kept her voice down only because alerting the agents would just make things worse. Anna and Bekenya were good, but they were no match for Siler. "He sliced my head open. He's killed dozens of people, including your brother." Peter sighed. "I can explain it, and I will, I promise, but first you have to listen to me. Do not let them experiment on you." "Nobody's experimenting on me. They're doing tests on my blood." Siler snorted. "I'm sure they were very convincing when they told you that." Peter shot Siler a look. "Nothing good will come of this, Claire. You can't let them. It'll be Dad all over again." Claire knew that Arthur Petrelli had funded Mohinder Suresh's experiments on Evos. "This isn't the same thing. Your father's work was done in secret. Everybody knows what I'm doing. It'll make it a lot harder to hide things." "You really believe that?" Siler asked in a patronizing tone. "I'm telling you this is a mistake, Claire." Peter moved closer and gave her his best sincere look. But Claire wasn't buying it, not with that bastard standing right there next to him like he was his bestie. "And I'm telling you both to get out of my house." Peter smiled, arms raised, palms up. "It's a Petrelli house, Claire. I've got as much right to it as you do." She shrugged. "Fine, I'll just let the agents know you snuck in. That'll go over real well." Now one of those hands was held up, palm toward Claire. No, it's okay. Look, we just wanted to warn you that..." "Fine, you warned me. You can leave now." Claire tensed. She was sure that this was the point where Siler would do something insane. But instead, he simply put a hand on Peter's shoulder. "I told you this was a bad idea, Peter. Let's go." With that, the two of them shot out the window, which Claire had only just realized was open. That explains how they got in, anyhow. At least now she knew why she hadn't heard from Peter. And as long as he was hanging out with Siler, she was just as happy to keep it that way. To be continued tomorrow. You can get the these novelettes, by the way, I forgot to mention this yesterday, originally released as ebooks. I don't know if the ebooks are still available, but they were collected into two mass market print compilations that Titan published. I'm in book 2, which is also includes Catch and Kill by Dwayne Swerzinski and A Long Way From Home by Kevin J. Anderson and Peter J. Wax. And there's another collection. They're both called Heroes Reborn Event Series, Collection 1 and Collection 2. You can get them from Titan Books, so you can get it that way. And I believe, like I said, the ebooks are available as well. Check me out online at DeCandido.net. Read my blog at DeCandido.wordpress.com. And please support me on Patreon, patreon.com/KRAD. Thank you very much. I'll see you tomorrow, and please stay safe.